All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to jump into a really fascinating legal case from the Philippines. It tackles a super modern problem, right? What happens when a couple gets married twice under two completely different legal systems?
So here's the big question at the heart of this whole legal battle. Now, you might think it sounds pretty straightforward, but nope. The answer had to go all the way up to the nation's Supreme Court to get sorted out.
Okay, so to really get why the court decided what it did, we've got to start at the beginning. Let's meet the couple at the center of all this, Rohaina and Abdulgani Sumagka. Their story, well, it's pretty much the foundation for this whole legal drama.
So, Rohaina and Abdulgani are both Muslims, and they first got married back in 1998 under Muslim law. Okay, pretty standard. But then, 6 years later, in 2004, they decided to do it again, this time with a civil ceremony. But things started to go south around 2006, and by 2010, Abdulgani files for divorce. And that right there is when things get complicated.
You see the problem, right? You've got two ceremonies on the books. One's religious, the other's civil. It leads to this huge legal question. Which one is the real one? Which one actually defines their marriage in the eyes of the law? So, Abdulgani goes and files for what's called a divorce by talaq. Now, this is a very specific type of divorce that's part of the Code of Muslim Personal Laws. It basically allows a husband to, well, to repudiate his wife. From his perspective, he was just exercising his right as a Muslim man who got married under Muslim law.
And this is where they clash. It's the core of the whole argument. Rohaina's saying, hey, wait a minute. That second civil wedding in 2004, that puts us under the regular civil code. But Abdulgani's argument is totally different. He's like, no way. We're both Muslims. We got married under Islamic rights first. That means the Sharia court is in charge here.
So off the case goes. It starts its journey in the Sharia court system, which, is specifically set up to handle these kinds of cases involving Muslim personal law.
And right out of the gate, the very first court to hear the case sides with Abdulgani. Their ruling was super simple, really direct. They said, look, the law that matters is the one from the first ceremony. That's it. That initial wedding is what created the legal bond. Well, Rohaina wasn't having it. She refused to accept that and appealed to the next level, the higher Sharia district court. But no luck. They basically doubled down on the first court's decision, affirming the ruling and keeping the whole thing firmly in the world of Muslim law. The divorce was upheld. All right, so now we get to the final showdown. Rohaina has lost twice, but she's not giving up. She takes her case all the way to the top, the Supreme Court of the Philippines. This is where we're going to get the final, definitive answer. And the Supreme Court? They didn't mince words. They settled the whole thing with this incredibly powerful and clear statement. They said, when you have both a civil and a Muslim right, the first right is validating while the second right is merely ceremonial. Boom. In other words, that first marriage is the one that legally counts. End of story. So you gotta wonder, how did the Supreme Court get there? What was the actual legal thinking behind a statement that's so clear-cut? Well, the court's logic was actually pretty straightforward, kind of like a step-by-step process. Step 1, a key fact is that both Rohaina and Abdulgani are Muslims. Nobody disputes that. Step 2, their first wedding, the one under Muslim law, was totally valid. Okay, so from there, it follows that the Muslim code has to be the law that governs their marriage. And if that's true, the conclusion is just simple. The second civil ceremony couldn't possibly change the legal status of a marriage that was already on the books.
The whole decision really boils down to this one specific legal framework. It's called the Muslim Code. This law was literally created to handle the personal stuff for Filipino Muslims. Things like marriage, divorce, inheritance. And the court basically said, yep, this is exactly the kind of situation this law was made for.
And the court wasn't just pulling this out of thin air. They actually pointed to an older case, Zamoranos versus People, which was a really similar situation. See, even back then, the court had already established this principle. When you have two Muslims with both Muslim and civil ceremonies, it's the law of that first marriage that wins out.
So, let's wrap this up. What are the big takeaways here? The Sumagka case gives us a super clear rule. For Muslim couples in the Philippines, that first marriage ceremony is the one that has legal teeth. Any wedding after that, it's basically symbolic. It doesn't legally change anything. This creates what lawyers call a bright line rule, making it totally clear which court, Sharia or civil, gets to decide in cases like this. Now, this ruling gives a crystal clear answer for this specific situation in the Philippines, for sure, but it kind of leaves us with a much bigger, broader question to think about, doesn't it? In a world that's packed with different cultures and faiths, how do modern legal systems balance respecting those deep-seated religious traditions with the need for clear, uniform laws that apply to everyone? That's a huge challenge, and it's one that legal systems all over the globe are still trying to figure out.